Can the Line 6 Helix actually do modern metal guitar tones? We're going to find out right now. Okay, before I get started with the clips, what I'm going to do is explain to you what I actually did. I chose two amp models in the Helix. I chose the Mesa Dual Rec, which is called the Tread Plate, and I chose the 5150, which is called the PV Panama. Now what I did was I set them up two different ways. The first way I set them up was by using everything that just comes inside the Helix. No external pedals, no external impulse responses, nothing. It's just everything that's in-house. So then what I did is I took the same settings on those amps and I applied an external impulse response from Ownhammer of the same exact cab with the same exact mics that are used in the internal version of that cab and the Helix. And then I also added the precision drive as opposed to using the Scream 808 that is inside the Helix. Reason why I did this was I want to find out whether or not the Helix can actually do modern metal guitar tones internally, and if not, maybe if we just add an impulse response and a really good overdrive pedal, maybe that will help make this happen. So we're about to find out what the results are of that test. So what I did was I played the same riff through each version of the amplifier, and everything will be labeled so you'll know what's what when you're listening to everything. So pay attention to what's on the screen because I'll put the information out there. So let's get started. Okay, so as you heard, there was a really big difference between using the Helix with all of its in-house stuff and using the Helix with a couple of things added to it, such as the IR and the precision drive. Personally, I thought that by adding the external things really helped everything sound a lot better. Now you'll also notice that I added an additional sound clip, and on the screen you just saw a question mark. I will reveal what that is later, and basically your hint is this. I took what I learned by using the external things and the internal things with the Helix, and what I did was I made a decision to create a whole new sound that I felt sounded much better, much fuller, and much more like what I would go after for a modern metal guitar tone. And once again, later in this video, I will reveal what I did so that you can apply that to your guitar sound if you choose to do so. All right, so I know what a lot of you are thinking. Big deal, everything sounds really different on an isolated track. But what really matters is how does it really sound in a mix? I bet you there's not a big difference in that scenario. Well, we're going to find out because here's how everything sounds in a mix.
Come taste and see what real life can be. Be a hero in your true life's mission. Focus inside and you will survive with every intention to be free. You're being fooled, you're caught in a trance. Eternal deception in a mask. Come back to me, your reality. I want you back. Come taste and see what real life can be. Be a hero in your true life's mission. Focus inside and you will survive with every intention to be free. You're being fooled, you're caught in a trance. Eternal deception in a mask. Come back to me, your reality. I want you back.
Okay, so even in a mix, you can hear a huge difference between the Helix all on its own and the Helix with the external things added to it. So in my opinion, I think it sounds a lot better when you add some really good impulse responses and a good overdrive pedal to the Helix. Now what's great about what Line 6 did with that product is they made it so that you can add all of those things to it. So I definitely commend Line 6 for making a product that's very flexible and allows you to basically plug in whatever you want and download as many IRs as you want and try out things so that you can get the most out of the product. So how would I grade the Helix regarding modern metal guitar tones? I would give it a passable grade, but I wouldn't say that it's going to be a high grade. I would say probably a C minus. The reason why I say this is because I didn't feel like there was a really full, rich tone coming from it. And truth be told, I haven't really played through the Helix as an all-in-one unit in many months now because I use it with my Synergy rig via 4-cable method. So all of my tone is actually coming from the Synergy modules when I run it through the Helix. And the Synergy modules, as you may or may not know, are actually real bona fide tube preamps. So I've been really used to that sound and feel and response for the last several months. So after that amount of time being away from the Helix and the tones that are inside of it, the things that I've really noticed are the feel isn't really there like it is with a real amp. It felt like it was kind of fighting me a little bit on some of the things. I had to really push hard to get it to respond to certain things that I was doing. And I also felt the sound is actually a little thinner and less aggressive than what I'm used to getting out of my Synergy modules. Now, don't get me wrong, I really do think the Helix is a great unit. I've owned it for 3 years. I just use it differently. I use it as a controller and an effects unit when I incorporate it with my Synergy rig. And it does a really good job with all of that. And I do enjoy using it that way. It's very easy to use, and there's a lot of great features, and the routing capabilities and the controlling capabilities of it are really good and very easy to use. So like I said, after being away from it for several months now, as far as using it as an all-in-one unit, I definitely noticed right away a pretty big difference between the feel and the interaction and the sound of a real amp as opposed to the amp models that are in the Helix. The strings kind of felt weird to me when I was playing it as opposed to how they feel with my tube amps and with my Kemper, to be honest with you. It was pretty noticeable. Like I was saying earlier, I had to kind of fight to get what I wanted. I mean, it wasn't really bad, but it was definitely something that was pretty obvious. So before anybody gets bent out of shape about what I'm saying and wants to say, oh, he probably just doesn't know a lot about the Helix and he hasn't really gone in depth with it to really realize what it's capable of. Well, let me just say, I've had it, like I said, for 3 years. Let me just tell you what my journey's been. I started out several years ago with a very elaborate Mesa rig. I had a dual rec Roadster combo amp along with a 4x12 Mesa cab, which had vintage 30s in it. I had a Patchmate Loop 8 switching system and 2 really elaborate full pedal boards. And that's what I used. And what I did is I got really tired of lugging all that stuff around and troubleshooting it whenever there was an issue for all these local gigs that I was doing. And it just took me way too long to set it up and tear it down, especially when you only have a few minutes to do that when you're playing local shows. So I went ahead and downsized and got the Pod HD 500 when they came out and ended up selling all that stuff so that I could just consolidate my gear into the Pod HD 500, and I used that for a couple of years, and I was happy with the convenience, but the sound was okay. But then the Helix came out, and the Helix was so much better that I was just so happy to use that because it literally was leaps and bounds better than the Pod HD 500. So when I switched to it, I was really enjoying all of the internal sounds of the Helix because once again, compared to the Pod HD 500, it was so much better. I was happy. Well, then I discovered the Synergy stuff, and then I started using that and incorporating that and with the Helix, but I used it with 4-cable method instead. So I switched from using the Helix as all of my sound to using it to control all of the sound that I get out of the Synergy unit. So all it does is switch the modules for me and add effects to everything. So, and it does it very well. So in my opinion, it is a better product for that than it is for sound, especially since I've had some time away from it and just revisited it tonight and realized that there is definitely some lack there when it comes to the high gain department on the Helix. So if you're playing like lower gain or mid gain or cleans, you're not going to notice as much of a difference with that. But when you get into the high gain realm, that's where all the differences, in my opinion, really start jumping out at you. Because as a high gain player, we really rely on the feel. I want to feel the pick digging into the strings. I want a good, heavy, rich tone, and that's really what I require when I'm playing live, practicing, or going in the studio, and I'm just not getting that out of the Helix when it comes to the high gain tones. Once again, it's a great unit for switching everything for me and adding effects because I think it's very, very convenient for that and very intuitive, and it's very well thought out. And trust me, I did everything that I could to make sure that it sounded as good as it could for this demo because my channel's all about giving you the truth. I don't doctor things up and strip things down to forward some sort of agenda here. I have no dog in this fight at all. It's just me trying something out and sharing that information with you. And I'm going to keep my Helix, obviously, because I still have my Synergy rig and I enjoy using it with that. But I'm probably not going to use it for any kind of high gain tones because, as you heard in this video, they're just not quite there yet regarding that kind of sound. Okay, so now we come to the point where I reveal what that mystery tone was. And I'm going to tell you what it was. It was a Kemper. Well, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, please do, because I got a lot of great stuff coming up, and I'll see you on the next one.